welcome to variation 22. Before you start working on the bow technique of this variation, it's very important to secure the left hand. So start off with concentrating on what the left hand has to do. This is very uncomfortable, this variation, because of the key. We have 6 flats and it's all in half position. So you're going to need a bit of time to concentrate just on what the left hand needs to be able to do, because to be able to do the bow technique, your left hand needs to feel at ease. One of the reasons for this is that the bow technique is spiccato, which is a semi-passive bowing, which means that the left hand has to adjust itself to the right hand and not the other way around. So your left hand really needs to know what it's doing, and it has to be comparatively easy for you. So what I did, I spent a long time doing this because it's hard, especially if you have small hands in half position. It's very uncomfortable. So I spent a lot of time practicing it slowly, détaché, using string crossings as double stops to secure the hand position, just basically so that my left hand could actually play this. Practice the variation like that, it will bring a lot of benefits. Another thing I'd like to mention, because it's all in half position, there's a tendency of the left hand tensing up, and I noticed that. Make sure that you don't press the strings down any further than you need to make a sound. You do not need to press them all the way down onto the fingerboard, that's not necessary. And also make sure that you release your left elbow to the left whenever possible. Don't keep it in a position all the way over here, because that just makes your left hand tense up even more and it just makes it more difficult. So only bring it over to the right as far as necessary, and whenever you can, bring it back to the left. So you have... So try to make sure that you have this movement going all the time. That is very, very important for this variation. Now, the bow technique in this variation is spiccato. We've had plenty of variations with spiccato and done spiccato in all sorts of different combinations. What's new here is that the spiccato is in triplets. And that means that in each group of 3, your spiccato alternately starts with a down bow and an up bow, and that takes some getting used to. So the best way to practice this as a preparatory exercise is to play each note 3 times. That way you get a feel for this triplet motion, and your left hand is moving at 1/3 of the speed. So your left hand is moving very slowly, and you can start working on the spiccato, so you don't have all the difficulties at once. Start slowly to get used to each group, alternately starting on a down bow and an up bow. That will be like this. You can do that as slow as you like in the beginning. It's always very healthy to do ultra slow spiccato where you are exaggerating the movement of your fingers, because that is just generally good for your bow technique, and you're training your fingers, so it never hurts to practice like this. In that speed. As soon as you start speeding it up a little bit, you will notice that it's not that easy alternately starting on down bow and up bow. That will be like this. It might help you to give a little bit of an accent on the first one, just to get used to that you're actually alternating down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow. I'll exaggerate a little bit. That helped me a lot when I had to do this for the first time. Of course you won't play it like that, but it seemed to help me organize my brain around the spiccato and triplets. Then if you can do that, you can speed that up all the way up to the speed that you want to play later on, so that you just get used to it. I wouldn't move on to actually practicing the variation until I can do that at the speed that I would like to play the variation, because it just gets more difficult when the left hand has to move faster. Okay, so basically, if you've practiced the left and the right hand separately, the left hand with string crossings and double stops, concentrating on the left hand, and the right hand by doing each note 3 times, you could start bringing it together and start slowly, because it's not easy. Remember, as nearly always in bow technique, but particularly as soon as the bow leaves the strings, that's all jumping bowings, the bow leads the fingers. The fingers have to adjust themselves around the bow, because it's a semi-passive bowing, so you only have semi-control over what's happening. So your left hand your left fingers, they have to follow the bow. That's basically what is the bow leads. So start slowly. Again, it never hurts to do it ultra slow to practice this, because you need that all the time. So start very comfortably. That will already help you bring left and right hand together. Then when you speed up a little bit, consider putting an accent on the first of each one again, because that does help a lot to get this triplet motion into one's brain and into one's hands, and getting used to alternately starting on a down bow and an up bow. That would be like this. You can speed that up and gradually lose the accents. You will notice when you don't need them anymore. So maybe you don't need them right from the start. I certainly did need them. It was a huge help for me. So start speeding it up as you feel more comfortable. I don't know if you could hear it. I still did the accents very, very slightly. And then you can get to the point where you don't need them at all anymore. By that time you're used to starting with down bow and up bow alternately. Now, as soon as you are working at this at any kind of a speed that's not ultra slow motion, you've probably noticed that the string crossings are most uncomfortable, because sometimes you just go over for 1 or 2 notes, and that is very uncomfortable, particularly if you're playing it fast. So I spent a lot of time only practicing the string crossings. Starts off in the second bar already. You have most uncomfortable, because you're going back and forth between the A string and the D string. That's where practicing string crossings and double stops comes in, because you want your bow to be in the vicinity of the next string. You don't want your string crossings to be any larger than they need to be, because if you're that's just not going to work, certainly not up to speed. So if you practice to make sure that your bow is not further away from the next string than it absolutely needs to be. That helps. And then I practiced it a lot. I practiced a lot just make sure that you only do the string crossings with your fingers. Basically, your 4th finger of your right hand changes the angle of the bow, and that will change what string you're playing on. Don't do them with your whole arm, because that's just too much mass to move at the speed that you're supposed to be doing it. So make sure you do it all here with your fingers. The next one, also very uncomfortable, is bar 9. That's this one. You're going back and forth again. So there again. Practice it in double stops so that you get used to being very, very close to the next string. And again, I've spent a lot of time just doing that. Probably drove my neighbors crazy. Anyway, the next one is this one. That's, I think, bar 13. See, I can't do it. That one's nasty because you only have 1 note on the E string, and that in this key. This one's really not easy. Yeah. There I actually even just practiced that a little bit. Just to get used to it. I found that very helpful. When you start feeling comfortable with this variation, well, I never really felt comfortable with it, but more comfortable than I felt before I started practicing it. So if you start noticing an improvement and you start to feel a bit more comfortable, what I would recommend you do before you go on to the sub-variations is to think about some dynamics, because bow technique is only really helpful if you can do it at different dynamics, at least within the possibilities of the technique that you're doing. And it's also quite fun. So be creative about it, think about dynamics and write them into the music. For example, I start piano and then I make a crescendo, so I go... and so on. So, but that doesn't mean you have to do it like that. The point is to actually be creative. Take a look at the music, think about where you would want to do what kind of dynamics, where's the music going, and then write it into the music and then practice the spiccato in the different dynamics. The greater you can vary the dynamics, the greater the difference between piano and forte, the better. Now, when you're varying dynamics in spiccato, what you do is to get louder, you move towards the frog, and to get softer, you move away from the frog. So basically, if you're here and you want to get louder, all you do is move to the frog. That will make it louder on its own because the bow is heavier, the frog. So you will feel it in your fingers that it's heavier. But basically, to make a crescendo, you move towards the frog, and then obviously the same the other way around. You get softer by moving away from the frog. So you're starting to get a lateral movement in with your spiccato just by varying the dynamics. I found that very, very helpful, and I enjoyed the creative side of it, thinking about where do I want to do what and everything. So I hope you enjoy it too.